Okay, welcome back. Here we are again, yet another pilot boot camp with Script Camp, and today we are talking story engines and log lines, trying to get you up to speed to finish up your basics of your show this week, so that next week you can move ahead into figuring out those story beats. Let's get going. Alright, we're in a staged channel, so you do have to raise that hand if you want to be heard. If you're not watching on Discord and you're on one of our different platforms like Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, then you should come join us on Discord. You can find our website by going to scriptcamp.net, and there you can get that link to sign into our Discord page. And you'll just be able to participate in a much more direct way, speaking out loud on the mic, and participating in the many different events, workshops, writers groups that we have on the server. We are on Script Camp today, which is part of our Skill Camp nonprofit. We offer free and low-cost classes to learn new skills and reach your life goals. We just added these new servers recently, Game Camp and AI Camp, that we're building out with some potential exciting stuff coming up soon. Different servers focused on different topics. Film Camp is filmmaking, Lingo Camp, language learning, Design Camp, graphic design, Toon Camp, animation, Word Camp, novel writing. Our biggest ones are Script and Word Camp, which have the most classes and events. So I'll just give you a quick preview of everything that's coming up on our different servers, including all the free classes and stuff that is going to be on the next couple weeks. So free stuff is going to be TV Bootcamp, this current class today, the 14th. And then we have Feature Bootcamp starting up with 2 free classes on the 16th and 30th. Those are Sundays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. All these times are Pacific Standard Time. And then these 2 courses are going to continue in those time slots. So Fridays, 6 to 8 p.m. is going to be this one, TV. And Features is going to be Sundays 11 to 1 for 8 weeks, all the way up until August, concluding after the week of the 11th. And then on WordCamp, we have our novel bootcamp that's getting started tomorrow. Week 1, 90-day novel first pages class is tomorrow the 15th from 12 to 2 on WordCamp, as are all novel bootcamp events. They're all Saturdays from 12 to 2 on our second server, our WordCamp server. Plenty of other classes you can see coming up there. That novel bootcamp goes for months. It's 90 days of classes, so there's plenty to do on WordCamp, even though it is a smaller server just numerically at the moment. We have plenty of other weekly recurring events, workshops, writers groups, labs, and upcoming classes too, such as brand new ones like UI design and Discord bot coding on CodeCamp in July and August. And we have advanced labs. You can sign up and apply for advanced screenwriting or advanced fiction. Weekly writers labs are today, Fridays 12 to 2, and then also another one Saturday 4 to 6, where you can bring your questions, topics, and up to 5 pages of whatever you're working on for feedback. So there's so much to do, over 100 hours of classes, events, workshops, and groups every single month that you can find here on our different Skill Camp servers. So we're very glad to have you, and definitely think about signing up, subscribing for just as low as $19 a month. When you subscribe yearly to Script Camp, you can sign up for your unlimited membership. The yearly is 40% off the normal price of $29 a month. And that subscription is going to include every class on every server, including WordCamp, including the animations classes on Toon Camp, filmmaking classes on Film Camp, and everything else. So Script Camp, that's our website and our home base right now, but that membership includes access to absolutely everything. And most importantly, the video library, which does include recordings of all previous events from our 2.5 years of doing these, or what is it, coming a little more than that at this point. So we've got quite a few. We've got, several thousand hours of classes and events for you to check out. You also get huge discounts on consultations and proofreads, script coins, which you can spend on things like readings every month, and member-exclusive channels to get your loglines reviewed outside of class and things like that. So come on by, subscribe, sign up for unlimited membership, and you will get access to every single class and event on every server. My name's Connor. I'm the creator, co-founder of Script Camp with Nacho. Been writing scripts for about 12 years, moved to LA 2015 without any connections at all, and have been signed since 2017. I mostly write in the horror, thriller, action kind of space, with some things like sci-fi and dark comedies and westerns and weird stuff like that thrown in here and there. Mostly I would just say the genre kind of world. I teach the boot camps, the weekly writers labs, and I also teach novel boot camp on Saturdays. So, sign up for just this course alone at scriptcamp.net/classes if you want to, or probably preferable to sign up for that unlimited membership and get access to way more than just one class. So you can check that chat. We usually post a poll with blue little numbers you can click on if you're interested, or some of these things sound interesting to you, but you haven't signed up yet, or you're interested in signing up. So check that out in the Discord chat if you have not already done so. Okay, so let's look at the overview for today. We are on week 1 of 6, so this goes until July 26th, which is when you're going to finish your first draft of your pilot. That probably won't be any good, and that's okay. We're not going to count on it being any good for us to need the motivation to finish it. We don't need any individual project to be good. That doesn't really mean anything for us. We're going to the gym and lifting weights, and we're trying to build up these skills so that we can write amazing pilot after amazing pilot and become this kind of generator of unlimited amazing ideas, as opposed to somebody that just wrote the one thing. Like, if you come into this with a passion project, it will paralyze you and be very difficult to actually get that off the ground and going, because your very first ever thing is not going to be like, if you're interested in making a cake, you should probably not make the first ever cake you bake for your best friend's wedding that's coming up, because then you're going to be like, well, it has to be perfect, it has to be good, it has to symbolize all the things about their relationship and be an amazing flavor, and also the presentation has to be good. And like, when you're first baking cakes, you should kind of focus on like one of those things at a time, as opposed to all of those things all at once, because there's like a lot that goes into making an amazing wedding cake. So the pilot is your wedding cake. This guy outside wants to rev his motorcycle engine and be part of our class as well, so good for him. So don't put too much pressure on yourself. Pick an idea that is not too special to you and is something that you will be able to write in 6 weeks. And if you really want to go back to it and revise it and rework it, you can, but you do not have to. You can learn whatever is possible to be learned from it, and then move on to the next thing guilt-free, whether or not you come back to this one, simply because you will always learn more by finishing something all the way through to the end and then moving on to the next thing, as opposed to taking forever and ever, years to finish one script because it has to be perfect the whole way. I've never seen someone actually spend years on a script that actually becomes exponentially better. It doesn't be like, the amount of time that you spend on something is not directly proportional to the reward that you will get out of it when it comes to art, and especially when it comes to this very particular and strange type of art / also commercial. This is art and also business, kind of what we're doing at once. And when you're writing scripts from movies and shows, then, especially, we're in Pilot Bootcamp today, right? What is a pilot except a business proposal to create a multi-million-dollar company that will employ hundreds of people for years, right? So that's a big thing to be able to do and be in charge of, and like, especially to run that show, as opposed to just writing a good pilot. But the bar is very high for what makes a good pilot, and so we don't have to like obsess with that bar, because you're essentially trying to get to the Olympics of writing, where you are going to be, writers in the U.S. It takes many years and a high degree of skill and a lot of networking and learning how to work in rooms and take notes and all these other things. This motorcycle guy just wants to drive me crazy. I don't know if you can hear it on the mic, but it's like vroom, 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 vroom. Nice job, dude. So anyway, don't put too much pressure on yourself. Allow yourself to write a bad pilot. It's fine. You're supposed to write a bunch of bad ones before you get to the good ones. So this week we want to finish loglines, of course, because next week we get into plotting. So you have to have that logline as your strong, solid foundation before you start building things on top of that foundation. And you will always want to make sure you're putting that extra work in the very beginning to ensure that you have a viable premise. You're not just making stuff up as you go. You have a real vision for what it is that you're trying to make, and you're trying to execute on that vision. You're not just like exploring and throwing stuff at the wall. Obviously, there's a way to do that, and there's a way to, you just have to try stuff for sure. But we're trying to write professional quality work, and the point of Script Camp in the server is to put you on the path towards writing professional stuff and writing professionally. It's not to say that you can't be writing for fun or anything else you want, but like the focus and the emphasis here is writing stuff that will sell, or stuff that will get you to the point where you can write things that you will sell. Don't worry about any individual script selling, and don't count on making money or getting reps or any of that stuff. This is not like a guru course. This is like school. So I would say these classes are great if you're ready to really commit and put your nose down and do the work, and to have those deadlines imposed on you, and to get that individual one-on-one help and assistance as you need it. But really, it is a lot of work, and it's not really like it's not good therapy. I always say screenwriting makes terrible therapy, and it's a weird hobby. I mean, it can be your hobby, and if you just want to do it for fun, you definitely can. It's a little unusual to write scripts purely for fun with no intention of them ever getting made, though, and for the most part, like, I would recommend writing other mediums too. If you're drawn to writing stories or telling stories, but you're put off by the cost that it would require, or the high pressure, or the really high bar that you have to cross, there's plenty of other types of writing that you can do. let's stop doing digressions and let's just quickly cover the rest of the things on the overview. Next week is Breaking the Pilot, Figuring Out Story Beats. Week 3 is Scene Cards, where we will expand those story beats into a full paragraph for every scene. Crash Course in One-Sheets is going to be July 5th, so we're going to sort of combine that idea of what is a one-sheet and what does a one-sheet look like for a pilot? How do we fit all our story info onto just one page? We're going to combine that with just that essentials of like first few pages here. Go ahead.
Sorry, Conor, it's very low. It's hard to hear on the stream.
My voice level is low?
Yes.
That's odd. I haven't turned all the way up. Is it still low? I just boosted it even more. Well, somebody let me know. The mic. I don't think the mic gets louder unless I add additional, like filters on it or something. Or maybe I'll have to change my settings.
It does sound a little better. Yeah, okay. Maybe we can check it out.
I'll move it. Yeah, I'll move it.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good. Are you saying, Carmen, on YouTube? Are you guys talking about Discord or YouTube? Okay. Yeah, YouTube is very low. Sorry.
It is. Okay. I'm not sure why. I'll move the mic a little closer. I'll turn it up as loud as I can get, but let me know if that is not enough. Okay. Thanks for that. So where are we? Yeah, One Sheets is going to be on the first week of the first writing week. We sort of separate this into there's planning. The first half is planning, so figuring out what happens. Figuring out what are you writing? What is the logline? What is the premise?
Now I think we can't hear you on Discord.
Oh no! Why not? You can't hear me on Discord? Oh no! What happened? I can see my levels on the stream though. What happened? That's odd.
But I can't hear you on the stream.
What's going on? It's set to voice activity.
Yeah.
Let me change the. Why would that be? I don't get it. It's not even picking up. Maybe I might have to reconnect to the Discord room. I don't know if you can hear me at all, but let me try. Will that break the? No, that shouldn't interrupt the stream. Let me try that really quick.
Just try to restart the Discord stream.
Okay, does that work? Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. I do not know why that happens. Give me 1 second to set that stream back up. Okay, that should do it. We're back. All right, are we all good? Can you still hear me, Nacho?
Yes.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Great. Let's get back on track. Gosh, it's taking me forever to get through this overview. Week 4 is Crash Course in One-Sheets and first pages. Week 5 is talking about characters, and we're going to touch on second act. And then last, we're talking pitching and explaining the whole story, and we'll talk a little bit of third act with that first draft complete by July 26th. Whew. Okay, that's the overview. Week 1, what's a story engine elements, and some things to consider or like caveats with certain types of story engines. Time slot and format we already talked about last week, so we will only briefly recap. TV genres we talked about last week and can recap as well. Filling out sketchbook and blockbuster moments, and starting to post your loglines in the second half of class is going to give you that time to rework your premise if you still feel it needs to be adjusted. Or you can, if you're still deciding on your premise, if you have a few different ideas or something like this, you can ask questions about which one seems to be working, or which one the room thinks you should go with if you really want to crowdsource the opinions of everyone here. It's up to you. You can see also at Thank You Nachos, just posted that link of all the upcoming classes on our Discord chat channel. So if you haven't found that, mouse over the Classroom channel on the left-hand side of your Discord screen and find that small white word bubble that says Open Chat. If you click that, you should open the voice channel chat on the right-hand side of your Discord window. All right. So where are we? Let's start with story engines. We did intros last week, and hopefully a few of you have returned at the very least. Let's do this just in the chat, and I'll check back in a moment. I don't want to do raised hands speaking out loud at the moment, but feel free to share with us if you haven't yet, and if you're new, and if you're just joining, tell us about yourself. What are your goals? What would you like to write? What would you like to learn? Favorite shows? Favorite genres? favorite writers. If you were here last week, maybe just remind us who you are. Tell us what it is that you're working on. Maybe you were trying to choose what your project would be. So you can just tell us. You can post your logline right there and stuff like that right there if you want. You will have to repost it when we share them later if you want feedback. But feel free if you want right now, just tell us who you are and what you're working on, and any other questions you have. I'll check back in the chat in a few minutes, so feel free to type that as I continue here. Hopefully we're also all reading pilots, because not today, but beyond today, in the further classes down the line, every week we will ask, what did you read? What pilot did you read this week? In Pilot Bootcamp, we'll ask about pilots. In Feature Bootcamp, we ask about features. In a novel, we ask about what novels you're reading. And the goal is to constantly be reading professional work. 3 pilots a week, I'd recommend. Minimum would be 1. And just be ready to say, what did you read? What did you like? What did you notice? What did you learn? Basic stuff like that. There's not right or wrong answers, and it's not a quiz, so it's totally fine if you just share your opinion and what you thought of the text. But it's just important that you be reading consistently and very, widely. It can be in your genre. You should read some stuff of the same genre that you're writing in, but it doesn't have to be exclusively in your genre. You can branch out as much as you want. Okay, so I will check back that slide in just a moment. Let's move ahead a little bit to Story Engine. So what's a story engine? Story engine is kind of a complicated idea. It's not one simple thing, and it's not like one sentence defines what the story engine is. It's a combination of different factors. It's an amalgamation of different elements that sum up to create a workable TV show in terms of conflict, stakes, dynamics, and relationships. And it makes it really clear how this is a TV show that would go from week to week. And you have to imagine, if you're writing in this medium, you are, for the most part, writing stories that could potentially go on forever. There are limited series and miniseries and shows that have a more targeted run of where they're going in terms of the story that don't have to go on forever. We have seen so many examples of that nowadays. But a workable story engine will make it feel like this could, at the very least, sustain many episodes. At least a full season. Meaning that it has to feel like it would not simply all be over after the first episode was done. After the pilot is over, if everyone's dead or something like that, it's like, how does the show continue unless it's a show about ghosts? In which case, the pilot probably should have had them become ghosts in that first episode to fully sell that idea and to communicate the full vision of what the show is. You don't want the show to change drastically after the pilot, for the most part. I know that's tricky because we sometimes see counterexamples to that. Think of Band of Brothers or any of these war-type shows where episode 1 is just we're in boot camp. But it's not a boot camp show, it's a war show. Like episode 2, we drop out of the airplane over Normandy. And that's really tough to pull off as a spec, right? Because if you write the pilot all set in boot camp, we're going to have to imagine that the show takes place entirely in that boot camp. If you want to sell the idea that the show is about going to war, they have to go to war, I would say, by the midpoint of the pilot. For the most part, you have to execute the thing that you said you were going to execute, rather than saying, well, later on down the line the show would fall into place and it would be clear what everything was and what the overall package of this was and who would enjoy this and what are the genre thrills. Eventually, in a few episodes that I haven't even written, eventually those things would all manifest and become clear. No. Those things need to happen in the pilot. And you're not going to get to write more episodes for the most part. So you can't be holding stuff back in terms of, well, it would get good later, or it would make sense later, or we would meet the central characters later. A pilot is partially a trailer for like the rest of a potential series. It's a proposal to create a multi-million-dollar company that's going to employ hundreds of people for years. That's a big deal, and so that means that the pilot alone has to feel like it will be self-contained and entertaining, self-contained at least to the extent that it has a beginning, middle, and end and is a satisfying story on its own. That you have to balance that with the idea that it is also a theoretically indefinitely continuing story that would, build from the pilot, but go in completely potentially unpredictable directions. The idea being that some shows really evolve their premise or their concept as they go through the years. But at least for the first season, we should have a clear picture of what what the basic trajectory of that show would be. Who would be the audience for this? What is the fun? What are the thrills that we're having here? What genre does this fit in? All those things need to be very apparent in the pilot, and we want to get to the kind of core fun of whatever it is that you're proposing in the pilot itself. If you tell me it's a show about fighting aliens, and then the alien ship crashes into Earth at the end of the pilot, I see this all the time from student pilots. They'll say it's about this, and then in the post-credit scene, there will be something that suggests eventually down the line a couple years later that thing might happen. No, that thing should typically happen by the midpoint of the show. Like, the core premise kicks into gear by the middle of the show. Think of your Breaking Bad or things like this. Jesse and Walter are cooking meth together around the midpoint of the pilot. Or they're at least, buying the RV, setting up their stuff, and quickly in the premise scene, very quickly after premise scenes, we'll get to those, like, core moments. We don't want to save all that for the end, and you don't want to save all the fun that we would have for a theoretical future that will never come to pass. Wow, that sounds like Terminator now. The future that will never come to pass. Anyway, so don't have the cool, interesting thing happen at the end of the pilot. We want to introduce a game and then play that game, and then conclude that game in the sense that we will feel like we finished the first round, but there's way more rounds to go, and it's only going to get a lot harder and crazier and more fun from here. That's the really difficult aspect of balancing all the different parts of a pilot. It's really hard to get this right, and even pros, you go back, most pilots are the worst episodes of the show. Like, it's hard to juggle all the competing interests, and we're not even talking about the notes and development that you go through and stuff like that yet. Like, it's hard enough to write a really solid pilot before it even starts getting messed up in the very complex, meat grinder that is the world of TV. So there's a lot that goes into this. This is quite a complicated task, and it's a heavy uphill climb. And part of just ensuring that you're building the confidence that you need to be building in your reader is making sure that your pitch, the logline, all these things make it clear what the story engine is and how this would be a sustaining series for the duration that you intend it to sustain. Let's look at the different aspects of a story engine and what actually generates plot material. I've talked about this one a lot, so maybe I'll go kind of quickly through this rather than belaboring the Office thing. But think of the story engine elements of The Office, where we have your characters that inherently create conflict with each other because they're simply at odds. They have very different personalities. They have competing interests, and they are constantly poking each other in the wrong way, right? Getting on each other's nerves and causing problems that the other ones then have to clean up or solve. Michael, for instance, is basically our protagonist in a lot of episodes and a lot of arcs. It's kind of a two-hander between Michael and Jim, I would say, overall for the show, though there is a broader ensemble that comes to matter, each in their own ways. But with Michael, he brings us this kind of persistent goal to the show, or that unifying objective that the characters have. He's the boss. It's like having the police chief character, or the superintendent character, or the principal character at the school, or anything like this, where it's like you have the kind of authority figure that's giving people assignments and telling them what to do. That is going to inherently create direction for the episodes, because we have different challenges that are based on different challenges that come up simply in the world of working in the paper office. For instance, we have to make a big sale. We have to increase our numbers this quarter. We have to hold an awkward meeting. We have to do a harassment seminar. Whatever it is, Michael is often going to be the one that is able to sort of bring that problem or that issue or that plot that conflict to the rest of the characters, simply because he is in charge of the place where they all work. That's another unifying element, is they all work in the same office. And it's helpful to have reasons why your characters are stuck in the same place together, whether that's family dynamics or relationships, whether that's something related to their jobs. You can just see why professions are such a key part of how so many TV genres work, because it gives them something to be doing all day. It sort of tells us the type of people that will be featuring in that show, in the sense that we know that, if it's a show about a family of bikers, it's going to be kind of like greasy tough guys, as opposed to if you're doing a show about, I don't know, soccer moms or something like that, right? Which is going to be a totally different kind of demographic in your audience, and also in terms of who are your characters as people. So having something for everyone to simply be doing or working towards or working against are going to be really useful, simply because they provide that sense of shared goals with your characters and ways for them to be competing for the same thing sometimes, and cooperating other times will give you a diverse sort of array of arrangements that you can leave these characters in the different episodes, thinking of who am I going to pair off with whom. Sometimes it's funny to see Jim trying to sabotage Michael. Sometimes it's fun to watch Jim try to impress Michael. Sometimes they're on the same side. Sometimes they're against each other. And by giving them this sort of common binding place where they live, or where they are, or where they work, something like that is just going to allow you to explore those same dynamics in different ways, because it's kind of it's not like a bunch of soldiers on different sides in a war can't really be the cast of a show, because, well, one episode goes by, half of them kill the other half, right? Unless it's like a Game of Thrones type political, maneuvering behind the scenes. If we're just in the trenches, Like, I could actually maybe see, now that I say it out loud, could see an interesting World War I show that follows a soldier or like the soldiers in one trench and the soldiers in the other. But the story engine for that would probably not last more than a season, would it? Like, how long are those soldiers going to be deployed in those trenches? I could maybe see it if you followed, like, the whole regiment or something like that, or we're constantly filtering them in and out and replacing them in this one trench. Maybe you could do something like that, but I hope that makes sense at least, that, like, if it's going to be a setup where clearly most of the cast would be dead by the end of a season, then there could be a problem where, like, well, what's season 3 of this then? They're still in the trench? I don't get it. Like, so that's what we want to have in terms of story engines. Like, it feels like it would fill the space that you've given to it. Like, it's like the goldfish that grows to the size of... Is that true? Do they really do that? The goldfish that grows to the size of the container that you put it in. The premise needs to sort of be the same, or feel the same way, or feel organic and logical in that same way, meaning that if you lay out the walls of a miniseries, then it should feel like it would take about a year's worth of episodes, or like a season's worth of episodes to get through. If you tell us the show is going to be following somebody as they try to accomplish a 10-year goal, then we might understand that to mean that's going to be 10 seasons of TV, then we're done after that. Like, Ozark is one example we often go back to. It's about a guy trying to launder $500 million in 5 years. That, I think it was a 5-season show, so that does kind of lay out the walls and the boundaries for it very clearly. Also in The Office, we have Jim and Pam. This track that we follow, which is the progression of their relationship, and the way that their slow-moving romance takes center stage in most of the show's big arcs, really becomes the heart of the show. And then we get a lot of interesting dynamics between Michael, Jim, and Pam, as Jim's role in the office changes, and eventually Pam gets pregnant and gets married and has to, like, stop working for a while, and all these things that just kind of cause sparks to fly in various ways with the core crew. And then finally we have Dwight as the sort of antagonist role for the most part, though it's always fun when we have to team up with Dwight. Or that episode where Dwight gets, like, in a car accident and gets head trauma and actually turns into a nice, reasonable, helpful guy for an episode. And actually becomes a good person, and they all miss him at the end and say goodbye to him as he goes to get surgery and turn into his normal, awful self again. Story engines are going to include various aspects of this. We have characters that will inherently be creating conflict with each other because of the arrangement of their goals, meaning that they have some characters that are working against other ones, some characters that are supporting other ones. You might have factions within your tribes or whatever it is, your different houses in your Game of Thrones or your different houses in your Harry Potter or something like this. That's going to put those characters on different paths that might cause them to interact in specific ways. Ultimately, summing up to a world that we feel there is potentially, unlimited conflict in this, or at least at the minimum 1 year worth of fascinating and interesting conflict between these characters in this one situation. That's not going to break the situation. Like, we typically don't want to make it into a different show halfway through a season. Here's your Breaking Bad, which, it's a popular show that almost everybody has seen at least some of, so it's good to come back to. And it has very clear story engine elements, right? We have your Walter as your flawed protagonist that has a clear goal, although his goal doesn't really have an end game to begin with. It's just make money for my family. Ultimately, he ends up filtering that, or ends up moving in a specific direction that brings him on about a 5-year journey. This meat chemistry teacher with cancer that becomes a sociopathic drug baron to provide money for his family after his death, or at least that's why he says he's doing it. In our first season is about Walt and Jesse coming together and developing his signature blue meth, learning how to cook it, negotiating distribution deals with this gangster Tuco. Supporting characters, we have Jesse as our central relationship, and we have a couple other key central relationship characters too, which are Skylar, Walter Jr., and in the periphery, we have Marie and Hank. Right? Hank taking that kind of antagonist role that is always, that, like, the close antagonist is a really useful type of character to have, because the close antagonist is somebody that or the frenemy protagonist, especially useful when they have one type of relationship in one context, and then behind closed doors or something like that, they have a different relationship. So if you have, your characters that one of them is, what is that thing with Spider-Man where his best friend is the son of the guy, the Green Goblin, like that sort of thing, where the messier it gets with those dynamics, the more conflict it's going to cause. I see a question in the chat. When are we taking loglines? We'll take those in the second half of the class, so at least about the half-hour mark from now. Okay, so engine elements. What's unique about the characters? What do they want? Why are we watching them try to accomplish that? What's the world of the show? Who are the types of people that inhabit the world? How do new people intersect with those main characters, what kinds of conflicts are going to be sustaining years of episodes. Let's see some raised hands. Somebody want to come up, tell us about a show that you like, tell us about the engine in these similar terms. You can raise a hand by clicking the hand icon. I see a hand raised. Go ahead.
I very much like, even though it was cancelled, Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, and I think the story engine for that really was the universe just pushing them in the right place, because his whole idea was he just wanders around getting cases. The whole thing was... Pardon?
What was the last part? You said he wanders around getting what?
Cases, as in, like, because he was a holistic detective.
Cases.
And
Go ahead.
so, as I said, and the idea was the universe would give it to him. They put him in the right place. So you could technically have that going on forever, just having new cases, if that makes sense.
Sure, and it's an agency, right? So he's not the only one that works there?
Yeah, I think season 1, he meets people, and then in season 2, they all officially become the agency together, and then it was cancelled, as so many things are.
So it starts out as just a singular detective, and he builds his team as the show goes on?
Yeah, sort of. Though the people who are part of his team sort of turn up in the first season, but they're not officially part of... They don't officially call themselves a detective agency together.
Oh, okay. So that actually does provide direction for the show on its own, right? It's a show about building that team, or at least the first season seems like it's about assembling that agent. It's like the origin story of the agency. Is that right?
Well, it was more about them all being thrown into a case together and having to solve it, just because that's what the universe did, kind of thing. It just sort of threw them in. It's a weird show based on a weird book. So it's difficult to sort of explain it, but as I very much enjoyed it, and yeah.
Okay, great. Anything else that you want to tell us about how the engine works on this show?
Well, there was a big sort of subplot behind it about this sort of secret government agency that were trying to track down sort of subjects that used to be part of the group. So there was a constant sort of... So not only was there this constant sort of looming threat, there was also this idea of there being other subjects with other abilities. And in fact, season 2 focuses on another subject and their abilities.
Okay, so yeah, sounds like maybe the premise evolves a bit as the show goes on. This might be a weird example, because if the story engine changes from season to season, then that's usually not how most shows work, at the very least.
Yeah.
But sounds interesting. I always wanted to check that one out. I never actually got around to seeing it. Thank you for sharing.
No one, thank you.
There you go. What's up? Yeah, I was gonna say, it's actually, this show I'm about to name is actually maybe kind of one of my comparisons, although I don't know how popular it is, but it's an HBO show called High Maintenance. I don't know if anybody's ever seen it. Have you ever heard of that?
I've heard of it. I think it's a dramedy. I haven't watched it.
It is a dramedy, and it's really good, but it kind of feels like a procedural, but it's pretty interesting. It follows basically like a pot dealer around New York. He just goes by the name The Guy, and every episode he usually visits one or two of his clients and kind of comes into their life. And we normally start with a glimpse of their life. But he's the thread throughout the whole series. But every episode is kind of like a different one of his clients, and they have a whole totally different lifestyle. It kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you're familiar with like that Humans of New York thing.
Right. Yeah. The New York.
That where they kind of focus on just a different New Yorker and their different lifestyle and how just eccentric everybody is. It kind of like that. And every episode you follow him as he goes and kind of gets involved in their life a little bit, and then now eventually it does start to dig into him a little bit more, because like I said, you don't even know his name. You do find his name out eventually. It's very MacGyver like, but I thought that was interesting. It does start to unravel him a little bit more as we go on, but it always follows that same every new. Although sometimes he does have like a repeat customer. He might go back to the same person, so we kind of get an old character that we love comes back. So it only was on for 4 seasons, and then I think COVID did it in, sadly, but it was really good. So that's one of my favorites.
Yeah, sounds like a cool setup. So in that case, that's a thing of the week kind of approach for the most part, where it is a profession that has a new task or job to accomplish. It sounds like, to some extent. I mean, although it's not that hard to sell weed to somebody, so I'm guessing that he gets involved in their lives a little more than just selling to them, right?
I mean, occasionally, like he might, they're okay. So like these two women that he goes to sell weed to, they've got a mouse in their apartment when he happens to come by, right? So he helps them take care of the mouse. So it's just a little thing like that, and then he moves on. But it's not really we hang with them a little bit before he shows up and a little bit after, and then he just kind of comes in. But there might be like bookends of him at the start, the end of the episode too, So it's that kind of, but it's pretty consistent of this, like, different people. And he just kind of, he might end up kind of sitting down and hanging out with them for a minute for whatever reason. And like, maybe a weird argument between the people there around, just stuff happens around. It's very Seinfeldian and just like kind of stuff happens, but, but yeah, very simple, like down to earth kind of show.
Right. Yeah, it'd be very tricky to write something like this that doesn't have a really consistent cast of characters.
Yeah.
Simply because the first episode, it's almost like an anthology. Like it sounds like, right? Like unless you have those characters that
essentially
come back more often, then that's more anthology style, where every episode is a self-contained story that has a cast that don't know anyone else in the other episodes. They're not interacting with anyone else in other episodes. I would recommend probably not writing something like that for a boot camp, just because we advise against anthology or things along those lines. But it does sound cool. I mean, like, I'm intrigued to check that out just because that sounds like a unique structure and approach.
Yeah, it's a good one. Definitely check it out.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Thank you for that.
Hello.
Hi.
I have two, actually. I have a really simple one and a more complicated one.
Go for it.
One of my favorite story engines is Pinky and the Brain.
Uh-huh.
It's the same thing every time, but in a different way. It's just, how is one character going to mess up the plan of the other in a
It's like
comedic
Dexter's
way?
Lab.
Yeah.
Because
It's
Dexter's
very
always,
simple.
one is a genius, the other is insane. Isn't that how it goes? That's the
Yep.
that's kind of the hook or the conflict in the heart of it. Is there's one super smart person always trying to accomplish a nefarious goal, and then you have the moronic associate who always ruins it.
Every time.
Although it's drawing to
Without
question
fail.
whether or not Pinky or Dee Dee are doing it on purpose. Do you ever hear these? I don't even know if these are fan theories or if they're just kind of confirmed in the show. But like, do they know what they're doing and they're trying deliberately to stop the Brain or Dexter? What do you think?
I have not thought that long and hard about it.
Oh, I know. No, Dexter's Lab was my favorite show as a kid. Besides The Simpsons.
It's just a great formula. It works every time. You can sort of do anything within that little framework. I don't know. It's a great idea.
Yeah, there's a lot of sitcoms that have this idea, especially British sitcoms that have this idea too. Peep Show is one of my favorite shows of all time. One is a genius, the other's insane. Mark's not really a genius, but he's like the one that is trying to be smart, professional,
Fred and Barney,
and successful.
It's a classic duo. Fred and Barney.
Oh, right, exactly. You have the ambitious or the competent character, or the more serious character, and then you have the less ambitious, less competent, less serious character that's always kind of getting in the way and dragging them down. It works great.
Yeah. And my other one is Glow. One of my favorite shows. Unfortunately, got canceled after season 3. The story engine. We have an struggling actress in Hollywood, trying to make it in the early 80s. She's best friends. Her name's Ruth. She's best friends with Debbie, who's also a more successful actress. And Ruth ends up cheating with Debbie's husband. They have a big falling out. They're like mortal enemies. Ruth finds a job with a wrestling company, like the her life leads her into this thing called Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, some shitty cable wrestling thing with women, and she gets a job in that. But then Debbie also gets a job as the lead, and that's sort of the main like central conflict of the show. But it's just a good, I don't know, framework to have all kinds of zany characters and locations and conflict and just anything goes basically.
Yeah, we've got that we mentioned the frenemy kind of thing. That's like a really strong example of that type of relationship, and it really solidifies. I've only seen the pilot, but the kind of dynamic really becomes clear in that in that last scene when she shows up at the ring and they end up fighting. And like she's initially not even going to get the gig until he sees them fighting for real, and he's like, "Oh no, that's it. That's perfect. Like we got to have both of you. We got to have that kind of energy on the team. Like that kind of drama is going to be good for us."
Yeah, he has a vision. It's they show his imagination on screen. It's kind of clever.
Oh, Mark Maron's yeah, he's a great character on that one. Thank you for sharing those. Jen, go ahead. Are you there, Jen? We're not getting sound for some reason. It could be that your mic is on push to talk mode. Oh,
Hold on. Okay, yeah, I think my actual mic on my computer was off. So mine is also kind of an animated show, and it's also kind of a two-hander. It's a show that I grew up with that's actually coming back within the year, Phineas and Ferb, and that's a show that I think is like very much lives and dies by its engine. Then it's a very broad topic because the whole like engine of the show is basically there's these two young boys whose main goal is to do something different every day of their summer, something interesting, something very daring and crazy that most boys of that most kids of that age don't think to do. And so you have this kind of unlimited engine where basically anything you could think that a child would want to do, take that and see how much you can build on it to make it very outlandish and cartoony and extravagant. And then that's your A plot. And then there's the everlasting conflict. And it's kind of funny because the show runs on this assumption that the boys are never going to get caught by their mom. That's the running theme, is that their sister wants to tell their mom what they're doing because it's inappropriate and it's dangerous and she's a control freak about it. And that's her main motivation. And we kind of understand that she's always going to lose. It's similar to what we discussed before with Pinky and the Brain, is that Brain never succeeds. We always know the outcome, that he's 99% of the world, he's not going to succeed, but we still tune in because we want to see how they're going to change that, how they're going to come to that conclusion. And Phineas and Ferb is kind of interesting because it has that B plot where their pet platypus ends up being a secret agent and fighting the evil scientist. And then there's that B plot with Dr. Doofenshmirtz. Everything he does is like think of like something really annoying and then or like an evil contraption and then play on that. And so again, that's a very broad engine and you can really work a lot with both of those. And then the real challenge is just having to find a way to get them to combine, because the rule of every episode is that those two plots have to combine and the secret agent plot has to put an end to the A plot. And that's what you tune in to figure out, is what are they going to do and how are they going to stop it to keep the status quo in check.
That's interesting. So there's almost two separate engines going on, or it sounds like you have the secret agent subplot, and then the main plot is kids that are kind of having fun adventures. Is that right?
Yeah, did you ever see the series back in the 2000s?
No, this missed my generation just a little bit.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's my generation. Yeah, it's a very clever show. And yeah, it basically runs on, there's an A plot and there's a B plot. And basically the conclusion of the B plot is that whatever their pet does, whatever the platypus does that stops the evil scientist, whenever the contraption goes awry, somehow there's a chain of events that also ends up with it erasing whatever the boys did today. And then the mom never sees, because the second she walks in, the backyard's totally clear. And like you always know that they're not going to get caught. And also there's that running tension with the subplot is that their pet can't reveal that he's a secret agent. And other than like very rare events, that status quo is maintained, but there's still this underlying tension of just knowing how are they going to maintain that status quo?
Right. It reminds me of Invader Zim a little bit, which the status quo is
Yeah.
that the alien is trying to maintain his cover on Earth, and then we know he's never gonna fully get revealed just because the show would be over if he did. The other thing it reminds me of is I don't think actually, now that I think of it, I think that these were almost just two separate shows in one. But Billy and Mandy had this kind of thing going on where it was like it's two separate engines, right? There's the evil Con Carne storyline, and then there's the Billy and Mandy and the Grim Reaper storyline, and they would like occasionally have something that affects the other one, but usually not. So that was did you ever watch that one?
I've watched bits of watched bits of them, but not during the era where they were together. I've only watched them like after they had been made into separate shows.
I see.
So I didn't really watch and I only watched like a couple episodes of each. I kind of skipped. I wasn't really watching that Cartoon Network at that time, I think.
Okay. Well, yeah. So I
It
think
looks like a really good show, though.
it was a fun one for me when I was that age. I don't know how well it holds up or whatever, but
Also a fantastic, hilarious premise for a kid show.
yeah.
To be friends with the Grim Reaper.
Yeah, and the other premise is that there's like a military dictator that's a brain in a jar that lives on a bear, and he's got like a bunch of Nazi type companions. Like,
Yeah, it's funny because there's another show that is kind of obscure, but it was also Cartoon Network that was similar to this. It was called The League of Super Evil, and it was also kind of like a group of villains that are trying to like break into the world, and then they also always end in failure.
right.
And so that's kind of a common thing, is that like sympathetic villains, but you also don't want them to succeed in their plans for
Yeah.
these like comedy shows.
That's like the Wile E. Coyote kind of dynamic where you can have a much more
Yeah.
we can like comedically enjoy a villainous character a little more if they're either incompetent or they have a soft side or they just never succeed, right? Like if something's always stopping them from doing their evil plan, then we can almost root for them in a way.
They do that very well in Phineas and Ferb. Like the whole thing with the scientists is that they just exaggerated. So like he has ridiculous every other episode he reveals like another ridiculous part of like his backstory where it's like, oh, my parents weren't even present for my own birth. I was raised by ocelots, and it's just like it's like absurdity, and then that like that's his motivation for the episode. And it's like there's always this like underlying theme of like, oh, we had this terrible childhood, but then like they always tweak it a little bit so that it fits whatever they want him to be mad about for that specific episode.
Oh wow, he's like the Joker. He's always a different backstory. You never know what you're gonna get.
Yeah, it's like kind of similar. And then they try to reconcile. It's also like a very self-aware show. Like they always, like the later they get in the show, they kind of become aware of their formula, and they kind of remark upon like when things, when people say certain things, because they use a lot of catchphrases, and they kind of like remark on like, oh yeah, this is gonna. It's like they do lean into lampshading, which can be a little annoying. I think, especially now, because I think meta is a little played out now. But I think at the time, especially when you're a kid, I think that's really funny because you kind of feel like you're in on the joke.
Yeah, it doesn't undercut the stakes for kids as much as it might for a more savvy
Yeah,
audience.
definitely. Because it's a very absurd show. It's very much like it relies on the rule of comedy. Definitely.
Right. Cartoons, often do a lot of that. Thank you for weighing in.
No problem.
So we are seeing that there's all kinds of different engines. Story engines can be based on a series of unlimited scenarios, like that should be able to go on forever, right? In which case, the profession is a great sort of unifying central element, goal or problem type structure to give to your characters. You can see why there are so many shows that are based around the profession. The protagonist in many shows has this job that gives them the license to intervene in other characters' lives, and also a steady source of conflicts because jobs come with problems every day that you have to solve. If there's no problems that comes with your job, it may not be a great job for a show. But most jobs have some issues that need to be kind of wrapped up, and it tells us basically who are the kind of people that are going to be doing this, and it's going to tell us what kind of stuff are they doing, and in what sort of genre does it fit into. You can always mix it up a little bit, like Brooklyn Nine-Nine is a cop show, but it's a sitcom as well. They do still wrap up the mysteries and still wrap up it is still sort of structured like a police procedural in the sense of how everything wraps up on an episode by episode basis. But it also follows all the sitcom sort of rules. Treating patients, hospital type procedural shows are another way of like every episode someone new to help, or veterinarian shows like what's it called? All Things Great and Small. Is that the name of it? It's that English show about a veteran country doctor in the like 1930s or 40s. Someone look that up. I think it's called All Creatures Great and Small. That's another problem of the week thing, right? Like, as every episode, there's going to be another cow that has broken its leg, or another, someone's pet fish choked on a quarter, whatever it is. Now we need to fix that animal and also deal with the people as well, and resolve, the issues with them. Sometimes maybe they are causing the problem with the animal, and we need to figure out why. Sometimes they need to get the animal ready for the prize pig fair or whatever it is, so we need to fix that animal within a week. You can see how a veterinarian show just provides that really steady source of conflict, other characters coming in and out, and interesting stuff for your characters to do. Helping clients is useful also in terms of everyone that has clients, lawyer shows, doctor shows. New problem every week, new scenario that we can sort of resolve by the end of the episode in that satisfying way that life doesn't really give us, because in real life, court cases take forever, and criminal prosecutions take forever, and investigations take forever. But part of the fun of that genre is, well, imagine if we could package all of that, resolve it satisfyingly, and move on to the next one, all within 1 hour. And then domestic servants, aristocrats, teachers, students, bosses, employees, apprentices, and masters, whatever it is that you have, like pretty much any single kind of job ever can be used as the foundation of a show. I'm sure there's something that absolutely wouldn't work, but pretty much anything. You know what I've seen really struggle? And I have that sort of story engine diagnosis slides. Thank you for these, by the way, today, Nacho. He built these slides out for us. I want to add something to this list. Well, let's not get ahead of myself. Let me start early on. So, unifying goal or problem, a great starting point. Fighting against or working together to survive some situation or to accomplish something, or like a sports team that always has a different new challenge that they need to overcome in terms of training, in terms of the personal drama, in terms of the big game. That's going to be your Friday Night Lights type of setup, right? Rivalries, arguments, and alliances to cope with the workplace setting or the incarceration. But a place where all your characters are forced to be is just really useful, especially if you have that, it's just a really nice foundation for a show. Everyone's trying to escape this thing or this place, or they're trying to survive blank event. This is going to be like your Lost, your Gilligan's Island, or trying to escape, or your Prison Break, stuff like that. Battle for power or control of a business, kingdom, or institution makes also just a really nice foundation for a show, whatever that institution is, whether it's a family, whether it's who's going to get the inheritance, whether it's that's your late season Succession kind of stuff, whether it's who's going to get to sit the iron throne, who will sit the iron throne in your Game of Thrones. We've got the institutions that you're struggling for power, things like this, corporations, and things like Mr. Robot. So there's plenty of different locations, institutions, jobs, and shared collective goals that you can give your characters that will just really make that just makes it clear what the show would be. Thank you for that link, Luke, by the way. Yeah, it's All Creatures Great and Small. My grandma loves this show. Here's some potential issues. I'll start with these, and then I'll give you an extra one that's not even on the sheet. So, problems with high school or college type engines and setups. A lot of people write about this because everyone goes through this and feels like they have, or I don't say everyone, a lot of people feel like they had some unique experience or something unique to say about this, when it's harder to stand out in terms of high school or college setups than you would think. They also have a short expiration date, so it's tough to imagine sometimes what the story engine would be, because they simply age out and graduate. If we're going to do 1 year equals 1, if we're doing 1-to-1 in terms of the years passing, you don't have to do that necessarily, and you can even you can kind of cheat the timeline a little bit. Like, think of Gravity Falls. That's not a school. That's like the kids are on summer vacation. But the premise is that the entire show takes place during this one summer vacation. Meaning what? They had a different adventure every single day, I guess. I don't know if it really works, but we just don't really... you can cheat it a little bit. You can say... I could see a show that we have multiple seasons taking place during one school year. I'm sure that's been done. What Euphoria? Aren't they like 35 years old in Euphoria by now? Luke's telling us Breaking Bad took 3 years for Holly to be born. Yeah, that's because Breaking Bad, the first few seasons take place within like a few months. It's like an absurdly compressed amount of time that Breaking Bad takes place in. Lost as well. There are big time skips in Lost, but like the initial action, like the first month or two, are pretty packed. Shows about family, potential issues here, and obviously, yeah, we don't even need to talk about Glee when it comes to wrapping up in terms of the high school and college story engine. Community had a nice take on this, where some people, it's a community college, so first of all, you're not locked into the 4-year paradigm, but second of all, some people come back and become teachers at that school. Some people, it's called community, right? It was never really about everyone that just attended the school. It's about the people around it. So it persists beyond just Greendale. Nacho tells us Money Heist was 3 seasons of a single bank robbery. That would be really tough to pull off. I don't recommend doing that for a pilot. I could see it. Obviously, it did work in terms of that show. But we're going to be like, what are we spending years of our lives in one building? It's tough. I'm sure that we expand beyond just the one building as well, and that we go flash to different places, maybe flashbacks in time, things like that. So in terms of news and journalism, it might seem like a strong story engine as reporters need to score scoops on stories every week, but it's just a little deceptively tricky because they have very limited ability to intervene and do stuff at those places, so it almost entirely has to be about the drama between just the reporters themselves. And it can work. Like, I would love to see a great news or journalism show. I don't think I have yet. The Newsroom is probably one of the more popular ones, and I've seen a few parts of it. It was kind of cringe, to be honest, but maybe it's good overall. Something totally unique and different. If you're ever working on something that feels like it has no comps, or you can't possibly compare it to anything, then I would suggest that you think, why has no one ever done that before? If you imagine there's whole rooms full of professional, intelligent people whose jobs it is to come up with shows and premises all day, every year, why has no one ever done a show about your thing? Maybe the answer is no one's thought of it, and you're the first to get there, and that's great, that's fine. Or maybe it's because, well, there's huge challenges that are associated with doing a show like that. I'm going to give you a suggestion of another one to avoid, and to not probably write, and there's a lot of caveats when it comes to this. Esports. How many esports pilots have I read? I think 4 or 5. How many of them worked? None. Esports are really difficult to crack. First of all, because you have to decide, are you going to use a real game that's a real esport, or are you going to make up your own, in which case you then have to make up rules and game mechanics for that sport and actually explore them to the extent that we will understand them on screen, plus have your, the people who design the show would have to come up with what does that game actually look like, what does all the art assets for that game and stuff like that look like, and you're just coming up with mechanics that, is not based on an existing game, but the audience now has to learn from watching your players play it on a screen. It would maybe work a little better in terms of virtual reality. I've seen like some takes on that are a little more like Ender's Game. This VR setup where like we are the esport, that kind of thing can work. But people sitting in basements playing on LAN parties on computers in games that we don't understand is almost impossible to make cinematic. Probably don't try to do this. I've seen so many corpses on the battlefield. Like, I don't think there's a great way to do an esports show. I see a comment in the chat. There was Video Game High School, which had 3 seasons. And also, I've seen a little bit of Video Game High School. When they're playing the game, it visualizes them as being physically in the game, too. So it's almost like the VR thing that I mentioned, although I believe the conceit is really that they're just playing on PCs or whatever. And then again, beyond that, that's a total fantasy world where it's like a high school just for gamers kind of thing. So, like, not 100% linked to the esports, but close. And anyway, it shows you, though, what that challenge was and how they stepped up to address that. Putting the characters actually in that space almost always is going to work a little better. And Megan mentions the main sport in Ender's Game was actually physical. Yeah, that helps, too. The fact that they were really jumping around, it's laser tag in 0 gravity, essentially. And Jen mentions the South Park Warcraft episode. Yeah, that's true. So that was a rare exception. That was like a machinima-based episode that they did, where the characters were doing stuff in World of Warcraft. But even within that, we didn't have to like learn all the mechanics of Warcraft to fully understand what was going on, which is helpful. Like, it was written in such a way that it was clear what was happening, and it was just more accessible to everyone. Question from Witemi: how about medieval high school? That sounds kind of cool. I've never seen a medieval high school show, probably because there was no medieval high school, but that'd be sort of fun to see the knights as the jocks and the I guess princesses are the cheerleaders and stuff like that. Maybe that's how you see it, or maybe there's something else there. Yeah, medieval high school is a good foundation for a show. Jen tells us Clone High is a funny planned high school drama. Yeah, if you see one of these problematic premises like esports or journalism or high school or things like that, you can almost always add another genre element in there to freshen it up, add that extra layer to the story engine, and just make everything start clicking together a little bit better. So don't take these as you can never write that kind of show, but more just like there are challenges that others have encountered on that minefield. Okay, so let's briefly recap time slot, format, and genre. and then we will take questions, and then we will share log lines and premises, and you can ask questions about your idea for your show if you want to. Okay, so we're going to come back to this slide here, but the question we're going to ask in just a moment, after we do our recaps, what is the engine of your show's concept? What will generate conflicts for many episodes? So you can share your logline too if you have questions about it, or you can just brainstorm what your concept would be and what your story engine would be and how that would all work. It doesn't have to be perfect. Don't worry about it getting it just. Excuse me. Don't worry about getting it just right. At the beginning, it's supposed to be a work in progress, and that's all good. Let's finish our recaps, and then we will share that. But be ready to discuss what is the story engine of your show. Okay, time slot and format. So we've got two basic ones. We have your half hour and your full hour. That's your time options. In terms of pages, half an hour script, 30 to 35 pages. What did I say, 34 here? 35, whatever, nobody cares. 60 to 65 for hour long. Half hour is usually comedy or action adventure, though we've seen a lot of exceptions nowadays, so you can make anything work. The only genre that's not really available is hour-long sitcom, because that just, like, doesn't exist. Maybe there's some brilliant way to do that, but probably not. That's one of those minefields that it's like, if you look at all the corpses on the battlefield, you're like, okay, why did no one make an hour-long sitcom ever in history? And that's one of those ones where I just would not attempt to innovate there. Okay, so formats is going to be either premise or status quo. We're talking continuity format. We're not talking format of the text on the page. That's going to be screenwriting standard format. So premise pilot, very long movie, basically. Your first episode is like the first chapter of a longer story. That's still, the challenge is that it needs to feel satisfying and self-contained on its own, and that it had a strong beginning, middle, and end, and that I feel excited to tune. I'm like, I have to tune in next week to see what happens next, but I still feel like I wasn't missing anything from that. There was nothing that was cut out or that was held back because you were either A, holding the best stuff for later, or B, you were saving certain reveals and you're not answering enough questions. And especially this comes up when we get to mystery type shows, or shows with that central guiding mystery, a central question that we're all trying to answer. You have to give us some answers. You don't have to answer the big question, but if you don't build the expectation that you will be providing some answers along the way, the audience will get frustrated really quickly with that lack of answers and lack of explanation. It just doesn't leave a good taste in the mouth. So you probably want to answer some questions by the end of the first episode in a way that builds the expectation that you will continue to do that. And we will want to know what the big answer is, but we don't get to know that one yet. So don't give it all away, but don't give nothing away. Jen tells us in the chat, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend comes close, 40-minute dramedy. Yeah, that one's got songs too, though, doesn't it? That's got the whole musical aspect, which increases the runtime, and also just provides that sort of extra flavor. Like it's not quite a sitcom. Okay, genres. Here's your choices of genre. Basically, I wouldn't make stuff up beyond this unless there's some amazing reason to do so. And certainly don't be picking genres from other media. Like sometimes I'll see someone is like, it's a transcendentalist genre. It's like, that's a book, that's a type of novel from the 1800s. What are you talking about? Like, that's not a genre of modern day TV. So try to pick something that is a modern TV genre. And essentially your options are comedy, drama, crime, sci-fi, fantasy, action or adventure, mystery or thriller, and horror. I'm saying ors there just because those are sometimes conflated or considered pretty much the same. They're not always the same, and adventure and mystery and thriller obviously have their own distinct categories to them, but I'm basically grouping a couple of them together. And then in terms of, this is linked to the continuity format, we have procedural, which are going to be shows that follow that thing of the week type format. Police, medical, and legal are the most common types, but I've seen procedurals. There's like a firefighter procedural called, what's that one called? That was on FX. Well, there's Chicago Fire, which is another different fire. Rescue Me, that was like a firefighter ensemble drama with a procedural element. So you can pick basically any job you want to do a procedural show based on. Animated is going to be usually half hour and either comedy or action adventure, but does not need to be. Every show here is going to be able to be summed up in 2 words, or 2 genres at the most. You don't earn bonus points by stacking additional genres on. And the job or the goal is not to express every single little tone in the show, just because, well, there's a funny part, so I have to include comedy. And there's magic in one part, so I have to say fantasy. You don't have to do those things. Just sum up as best you can by picking 2 genres and allowing us to see how those flavors interact. But it's like chocolate and peanut butter sounds awesome together, but chocolate peanut butter with raspberry, Skittles, kiwi, caramel, mango, and also vanilla starts to sound like you just threw a bunch of stuff in a bowl. So pick 2 genres at the most. Okay, we're going to move ahead into sharing stuff in just a moment. Let me just open for all questions on anything we've talked about so far. You can raise a hand or you can leave a comment in the chat. And if you're watching on one of our different sites like Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, then you can leave a comment. We should still be able to see it. Hi, Luke. Go ahead.
So we talked about sort of what makes a strong story engine. What are some like bombs that you could throw in a story engine to just ruin it utterly? Like it was all a dream, things that just once they're introduced, that's where everybody jumps ship. That's like, okay, we've had enough. Does that make sense?
I think so. Let me just make sure that I understand. So things that ruin a story engine right away. So it was all a dream almost can't be part of a story engine because that's like a twist, right? That's like a late twist. So I would say big twists can't exactly be part of, unless your show has some sort of mystery or something like that where there are going to be twists built into the structure. I think you can't like have the rules already changing as being part of your initial pitch for what that show would be. So you can't exactly throw too big a wrench, like you mentioned, throw too big a sabotage into just the basics right off the bat. If it seems like, so I'll give you a red flag for this. If it seems like you've set up a completely different show by the end, like we could change the title of the show by the end, and then that new title would make more sense, then you may have gone off the rails a little bit, or you may have, if you write out too many characters in the pilot, it's like, well, who are we even following in the next one? So like slasher is another very tricky type of show to make it work. We have to pace and balance a slasher show very differently than we would a slasher movie, right? Because in slashers, we're watching all the characters basically die. You can't really do that in season 1 of a show unless we do the anthology format, which there was a show, I think a Canadian show just called Slasher that was on Netflix, and it was anthological. So every season had a cast, and then there was a different killer and stuff the next season. The Scream TV show also explored how to actually pull off a slasher on TV. You have to make other things come to matter. So if you're writing a show that is just one genre, and that genre is so is so unrelenting as a slasher, and you just are like, every scene is a character getting stalked in a new way or something like that, then that kind of does blow up your story engine too, because it doesn't allow for other things to matter enough in the world. Does that make sense, Luke?
Yeah. Are there any more that you just absolutely hate? Like maybe just personal. I'm trying to collect as many sort of bad storytelling tropes as possible.
Okay. Well, stuff that I hate stuff that I don't like watching isn't necessarily a bad storytelling trope. I mean, I don't really watch shows based on romance very much, just because to me it's just frustrating to watch. Either you're gonna do it's gonna take so long that it's like the Jim and Pam thing. It takes 5 seasons for them to get together, or it's going to be wrapped up by the end of season 1, in which case they just are together, and now the nature of their relationship changes, and now we're watching a couple rather than people trying to go on dates and stuff, and that's just like a completely different dynamic and everything too, which is why a lot of sitcoms people feel they jump the shark after the main couple actually gets together. That just is a built-in problem when it comes to romance on TV. Once they are together, what do we do now? How do you keep it interesting once they actually are together? So yeah, I think that just shows entirely based on who's with who and who's breaking up with who and stuff like that, I just can't really get into.
What about like changing location or like a sudden tone shift?
That would be
maybe like
Go ahead.
season 3, we go to a new location and we have all new characters and the lead dropped out or whatever.
Well, this doesn't happen much. It does happen sometimes. Archer did this, but that was so late in the show that I think they were getting bored. It felt like the creator just wanted to end the show and was just doing wacky stuff because he was bored. So there's like 2 or 3 seasons of Archer that are like almost a completely different setup, style, and everything else. Maybe some of the fans liked it, but to me that was jumping the shark, and I was like, why are we even still watching this? We're not even watching the same thing anymore.
Okay. Or like the gas leak year in Community.
Yeah, I guess.
Does anyone have any other example?
Not really their fault.
I feel like we're just getting to the tip of the iceberg here.
Sure. Well, but the thing is, most of these are not elements in the story engine that would be apparent from the pilot. Like, these are things that happen later on in the run of the show. When it comes to just go ahead.
What are some things that would just cause a pilot to fail utterly, like right at the end.
Oh, you kill your main character.
Kill your main character is a good one.
Unless it becomes clear, oh, somebody else was actually the main character the whole time, and it was a giant misdirect, and that's your hero. But that, I can barely think of any ways that would work on TV. Except, I guess the Shield almost does this. But go ahead.
Red Dwarf kills off the main character in an interesting way. The American Red Dwarf pilot is probably one of the worst things ever. If I could identify all the little reasons it was bad and collect them, that would be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But it just doesn't work from the beginning. It's not something at the end that causes it to fail.
Okay,
or causes you to jump ship.
What's the basics that are making it not work? Is it problems with the dynamics?
It's just utterly unfunny and disjointed and poorly constructed. I don't know. There's bad voiceovers. There's it's a mess. It's bad.
Okay, I won't make you go through it all now then, I guess. But hopefully that gives you just a couple ideas of stuff that might sabotage your show from the very beginning. I mean, almost anything can work, like if you write it well. It sounds so dumb. It's like the worst teaching advice ever. Just write it good. Just do a good job, and then it'll be good. And if you do a bad job, it'll be bad. End of class, right? But that's yeah. You want to have a story engine that doesn't feel like it will burn out in the first episode. So you kill your main character, or you kill your whole cast, or they're just people cannot possibly come back. You don't want to break the relationships too early. So in terms of like a family, unless it's a show about that family slowly coming back together or something like that, then you don't want to have them all broken up and be apart and not aligned anymore at the end of episode 1. So characters that get way too split up too quickly, and now it feels like they're in a bunch of different shows. And there are some shows that do this over time, but don't do it in the pilot. Like, you can't break the premise already. We don't know what the premise is yet. To me, I still like Barry overall, but Barry in season 3 and 4 did start to feel a little bit more like the Barry and Sally and also Hank show, and not so much just all one show like the early seasons did. So yeah, don't break the premise before we know what the premise is. Go ahead.
What about just giving the character everything he wants? I'm just imagining like satisfying bad ways to end the first episode of Cobra Kai. What if Johnny Lawrence just got a karate studio all paid for and everything was back to normal and he was on top and he lived happily ever after?
Right. Just
no conflict, no stakes.
Yeah, especially if we say he lived happily ever after. That's kind of saying they can't do any more episodes, right? Unless the other episodes would, I don't know, be about somebody else in the world. That's the anthology thing. Yeah, don't give them everything they want right away. Don't resolve the central question by the end of episode 1, because then it's like, okay, now what? We don't want to be left with this sense of, like, the worst words we could ask at the end of a show is, now what? Unless it's in the tone of, like, now what? Like, what could possibly top that? That was so great. I can't wait to see what the next thing is. Obviously, that is fine. But this question of, like, wait, but what do they do now? Like, I don't get it. It's over, is not the sense that we want to leave the characters with.
Okay. What if your pilot just had some really bad Cabin in the Woods style twist at the end? Like right at the end, like, oh, this was all just part of a dumb experiment or something, and you're
like a huge twist in the last
you're the
30
rat in the
seconds
maze,
of the show.
the viewer.
Yeah, terrible idea. Definitely don't introduce a massive twist that recontextualizes everything that came before it.
Right.
But watch somebody come up with a great example of that somehow being done. But
there probably are, but I'm thinking just in a really dumb, terrible way. Like, oh yeah, that really complicated thing you just watched was just some kid scribbling in his high school notebook before class gets out, and he has a summer adventure or something. The end.
Right. Exactly. Like, none of that was real is not a great ending for a pilot.
Okay, I think I got a few good examples.
Okay, great. Thanks for asking. Let's open the floor to other questions. I see a question in the chat. How about an immediately stale concept like a family sitcom centered around a goofy dad? I would say if you're practicing and learning and improving and just trying to teach yourself how to write a pilot, it's not bad to write something that is unoriginal, cliched, or anything else. I mean, you could do a whole show that's like, a guy goes off to war, and that could be that if you're trying to teach yourself these skills, it sometimes is better to pick a premise that is a little bit more down the middle, just because you're trying to if you can't execute a down the middle premise, it's going to be tough to execute an out of the box premise. So you almost do want to angle a little bit more towards something more familiar for your first few, like a genre you know really well would be useful, because then you know all the conventions, you know where to stay on the track and where to go off, and it's fine if you just write something that hits all the major beats. You're essentially trying to learn to play scales right now, and in order to play those scales, you need to, get the repetition and get the muscle memory down. So don't worry too much about originality, but you can definitely do consider it. I mean, we're trying to come up with cool, interesting, hooky stuff that people haven't seen before and execute it as best we can, but it is not required to improve. Improving will come from the hard work of reading, writing, and moving on to the next thing. I see a raised hand. Go ahead.
So I was gonna say, if you had an amnesiac character, how much would be too much? Showing how much would be too much in the pilot? For example, maybe they find a photograph. Would that be too much? Or I don't know, because I feel like if you can't show too much of their old life for them to discover too early on, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it depends on.
I don't know.
It depends what the arc of the show would be. I mean, if it would be multiple years, multiple seasons of them getting their memories back, then that would be a different situation. If it was just like, halfway through the first season, they would theoretically get their memories back. If we think of something like Born Identity, that's like a famous amnesia story. I know it's not a TV show, but it could have been a TV show, right? So the main character is a like sleeper agent, ex-badass spy kind of guy. He ends up getting amnesia, washes up on a fishing boat, doesn't know who he is or where he came from or why he can do kung fu and cool stuff like that. And the movie is about him becoming, the cool spy again. But he basically gets all his abilities back by the halfway mark. So it really depends on if we want to have your character become their old self again or rediscover, like if that's part of the... Are we watching the show to watch them very slowly discover who they used to be? Or do we need them to get to who they used to be in order for the show to work at all? So you would kind of need to balance and figure that out before you know how much is too much to give away at once. Because we need to know how long the road is that you're going down before we know if you're going too far down at one time. So probably if it's going to take like at least a season to get through your character's recovery of their memories and rediscovery of who they are, then little clues here and there are going to be like plenty for a pilot. Photographs, videos, and I like point them in the direction and take them on the first like step or two in that direction towards that goal. Take them like to the first benchmark of that goal. That would be like, imagine if we do the Born Identity as a show, maybe the end of the pilot, or well, I guess by the halfway mark we would want him doing cool spy stuff. So, but let's imagine that let's do it. Think of a different setup for a show that's going to be like a much longer arc. So it's not an action adventure story. It's going to be like Jason Bourne, very, very slowly recovering his memories. Maybe by the end of episode 1, he goes to the firing range and he gets a perfect score on the gun shooting, right? And he's like, how did I do that? Holy crap, I must be some sort of killer. Cut to black. That might be enough. So really, yeah, I guess you just have to ask, how long would it take to fully unravel these questions and these mysteries?
Okay, yeah. My other question would be keeping things PG. So what are the biggest hurdles for that?
For keeping things PG? Well, you don't have to keep things PG. You're talking about if you're writing in for like a younger audience, how do you?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Because not for the TV thing, but for the film script that I was writing, I'm trying to keep it PG. And then I keep sort of going, would this be too scary? Would this be too violent? And I don't know if you've got any sort of thoughts on keeping things... Because I feel like it's important to fit scripts into certain ratings because it means that certain people get to access them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And there's different genres that that can work in any age group. We've seen, your Goosebumps is horror for middle graders. We've seen all kinds of, Scooby-Doo is kind of horror for kids and things like that. So I would say the big things in keeping your story on the PG, I guess we say we have TV PG and we have TV Y7, which are two of our major age classifications. And the next one up is TV 14. So you probably want to keep yours TV Y7 or below, and TV G being like small children's entertainment. So TV PG is going to be like your average cartoon, and it can involve slapstick violence. and like punching and kicking, but typically nothing that's gonna like break the skin in terms of violence. You don't want to be like stabbing people or shooting people in TV PG. When you move up to TVY7, then that's going to be like your Star Wars cartoons, and then you can have characters shooting each other and things like that. It's going to be pretty tame, though. You're not going to focus too much on emotional suffering, and you're not going to be graphic. So we're not going to show, it's in a Star Wars cartoon. It's going to be like the robot goes bzz, and the blue laser hits the stormtrooper and he falls down. It's not going to be like we blow a hole through him and see the organs leaking out and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So you can see how, just in terms of graphicness, pull back a lot. And typically, yeah, we're not showing gore, blood, things piercing the skin, or anything along those lines. In terms of language, the standards are a little bit different from country to country, but basically, I would say if you want to keep it in the PG or Y7 range, nothing worse than crap. Crap is the worst word you can say. The moment that you're going to that, we're on YouTube. We're all adults here. If we're saying shit in the show, that basically immediately pushes it up to the next rank up, which is going to be your TV14. And then anything above that, obviously, will only push it higher. F-bombs are going to push it to TVMA. So yeah, language, violence, and then we have sexuality. So obviously, any nudity is not on the table for TV PG at all. In terms of sex and romance, you're going to want to keep it to like kissing at the absolute most. You can get away with more of it than you think, but not that much. You can have characters making out at the absolute most, and you sometimes see that in like Adventure Time or shows like that, which are Y7, but nothing beyond that. And even in terms of the character's interest, they wouldn't really be interested in doing anything more than that, because you don't want kids to not, you don't want, if the parent walks in the room, them to be like, the kids can't watch the show. So nothing that would make the parent walk by and immediately ban their kids from watching it. So there's your main categories. I mean, we have sex, violence, and language. That's the main stuff that we're concerned about, at least on American TV. Does that all make sense?
What about horror? Because that fear.
Yeah,
because sorry.
No problem. So it's more about things not really being. You can make something very scary monsters, scary ghosts. It just can't be too real. Like if it's not really going to be about like your dad is a serial killer and he's going to strangle you in your sleep. It's going to be more about, there's a monster, there's a giant wolf that has been haunting my family, or there's been, whatever fantastical. If it's a little more on the fantastical, impossible, exaggerated, cartoony side, you can basically go as far as you want, because if you're writing a script, ultimately we're not designing the visuals, and you can imagine that the filmmakers who would bring these things to life, they would animate it in a way that was scary but not too scary. But really, it's not our job to limit it too much there. So I would say pull back on the graphicness and make sure that we're not like stabbing people and things like that in terms of the horror, but in just the realm of scary monsters and ghosts and concepts like that, you can go pretty much as far as you want until we hit those lines.
Okay. And the final thing with that was sort of more adult topic things like addiction, like suicide, depression, that kind of stuff. How far can you go with that?
It's a good question. It really depends on the topic and depends on your market and the culture and that you are in. I mean, the U.S. and I'm assuming you're based in the U.K. Have different standards and different things that are considered acceptable to talk about. Like, just for instance, I think I went to Scotland when I was 9 or 10, and there was nudity in a shower commercial or like a shampoo commercial on TV, and I was like, "That's illegal. You cannot do that, right?" Like, I've never seen that before in my life. So to some extent, this is culturally dependent and depends on who you ask. I would say in general, the more real, the same thing. The more real it is, the less leeway you have. When it comes to addiction, showing a character popping pills from a little orange bottle is going to be considered more disturbing for a kid, because that could really happen in their life, as opposed to you have Gollum, who's addicted to the One Ring, right? And he acts just like a drug addict, but it's not a real thing. So you can go as far as you want, and you can explore those same topics and same themes, but with a degree of separation. When it comes to emotional topics and mental illness and PTSD and stuff like that, you can definitely explore those more nowadays than you've ever been able to. It still usually helps if we have it in a slightly less real context, like your character was traumatized by a dragon, not by their parent beating them, or that kind of thing. Does that make sense? So just have a little bit of a sidestep in terms of the realness of it, and you can go basically as far as you want.
Okay.
Great questions. Thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. We have a question in the chat about... Let me move this back. Gravity Falls really pushes the boundaries for what counts as TVY7. Sometimes. There's some somewhat scary elements to Gravity Falls, especially in the later seasons, when we start to unravel like the cosmic eldritch horrors that are besieging the Mystery Shack and things like this. It's not that bad, obviously, but there's scary stuff here and there. And similarly, Adventure Time, I think, pushes the boundaries a little bit. I haven't really heard the word sexy on many cartoons except for Adventure Time. And just those ideas of kind of adolescent, middle grade crushes and love and stuff comes up more on that show than you would think. Also, violence, but in that very fantastical, cartoony kind of way. Okay, question from Witemi. I have a 25-page pilot. Well, you're about 5 to 10 pages short, probably, so I would first of all expand that to 30 to 35. What do I do next? Do I move on to the next project? Do I make a synopsis? Not sure how to write. I know I don't write the whole series, but not sure what's next. So first of all, expand it by 5 to 10 pages. Second of all, readings and swaps and rewrites. So you want to improve it. I would say do 3 to 4 solid drafts as best you can, and then assess your portfolio. How many scripts are in your portfolio? Do you have 3 to 5 scripts that are rock solid, amazing quality that you've done multiple rewrites of, that you've gotten peer feedback on and review and swap and all these things? If so, then you might be ready to start querying and attempting to get representation, entering contests and fellowships. If you don't have a super full portfolio, you say I have 10 scripts, but most are in rewrites. Okay, so try to pare that down to 3 of your best ones. Pick the 3 best ones and finish rewriting those and polishing them as much as you possibly can. If we're talking half-hour pilots, maybe more like 4 or 5, but like features are hour-long. 3 is going to be a solid number to start with. Make them as good as you possibly can, and then from there, I would, I guess, pursue representation and keep writing, of course. I will say you've picked one of the worst times to possibly pursue representation, but that's neither here nor there. Do you need a synopsis for pilots? Don't worry about it. No, you do not need a synopsis for the pilots. Right now, I would polish up those 3 amazing scripts, start entering contests and fellowships, doing your swaps and readings, see how you place in those more contest type environments, see what the feedback is you get from others, and go from there. Thanks for the questions. Okay, we have half an hour left, so let's open it up to sharing loglines and premises, and anyone can feel free to ask questions about your premise that you are working on. What have you guys got? Let's hear about those story engines too. All right, floor's open. Witemi, go ahead.
Wait, can you hear me?
Yes, go for it.
Okay, so just share the logline.
Yeah, whatever you want. I mean, we are. If you have loglines that you feel are ready for feedback, then you can share and post them. If you just want to talk more broadly about the premise, though, you can.
Yeah. So my logline is Jim takes an opportunity to steal the identity of a doppelganger knight and embarks unprepared on an unexpected adventure to save a princess, fight a dragon, and unravel a mystery of the kingdom.
Whoa. Okay. So that was the pilot logline. Do you have a series logline too?
Oh, that was the series logline.
That was the series logline. Okay. Who's Jim? What world are we in?
Medieval fantasy.
Medieval fantasy. Okay. So I would take a big step back and immediately reassess how your series logline works, because the series logline is going to sort of give us the overall impression of what we're doing. It's not really going to take us step by step when this happens and then this happens and then this happens as much. This would be sort of helping us paint the picture of what the engine would be. So, in a turbulent kingdom that's run by dragons, a knight begins to ascend to the role of king of the Dragonlands. You know what I mean? Something like that is going to tell us what is the overall impression of what's going on. Right now, that logline sounded like it was too packed with information that I wasn't even grounded in what world we were in. Definitely don't use a character name, because I don't know who was it, Tim or Jim? I don't know who that name refers to. So you have to kind of sum up, give us a stronger sort of foundation of the world that we're in first. And then in the pilot logline, which is your second logline that you'll be doing for this, so I would write that one next if you haven't yet, then you'll be taking us through a little bit more like a movie, tell us what's the catalyst. So when this happens to Jim, now he must do blank before blank and sort of take us up to that first milestone or that first goal. You know, if it's about a guy becoming king of the dragons, then you say, you know, when he's chosen as the heir of the dragons, now this knight needs to, you know, win an archery contest in order to ascend to rank 1 of the dragon clan. Something like that. It's just going to help us understand what's the first chapter of this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so in this case, since I already wrote the first pilot to start rewriting, the character feels the identity of a knight and masquerades as that identity, and he ends up going to see the princess and ends with the tower being invaded, and I kind of leave it on a cliffhanger.
Okay, great. So yeah, use that as the foundation for your pilot logline. I like the stealing the identity of the knight. That tells us a lot about what the story, how the story engine is going to work. And then you're in terms. So yeah, make sure you have those two separate loglines that express those two distinct ideas. One, what are we doing overall? What is the broader journey of this? And then second of all, what starts the story off, and what's that first milestone?
Okay.
Cool. Questions?
No, thank you.
Great. Thanks for sharing. Sorry, I had my volume down on the stream. Now I'm back. We're looking now at Status Quo by Luke. Did you feel this needed more work or feedback?
I changed just a couple of things around.
Okay.
And I don't really think it needs feedback, but if you see something that you bump on, let me know.
Sure. Why don't I just read it instead of posting it up on the screen and stuff like that? All right, series. This is your sci-fi comedy. When a suicidal, work-dodging schlub is resurrected aboard a starship with a roster of misanthropes, he cons his way through interplanetary crises while trying to earn enough credits to die. Great. I love the changes you've made here. Very evocative and clear. Pilot logline. When the captain's brain gets stuck in its vacation tube and a wannabe first officer... Wait, what?
Oh, cut the and. I don't know how that typo ended up.
Okay, so when the captain's brain gets stuck in its vacation tube, a wannabe first officer and a newly resurrected employee must take his place and deal with an alien intruder. Okay, great. So is your main character the first officer? Or is he the employee?
I guess I should switch the order.
I would
It's the employee.
Yeah. So the employee is your main character. So is he being enlisted into this job, or how is he being involved in that job, or why is he taking on that role?
He's enlisted by the wannabe first officer.
Okay, so he really is just told to do it. It's like he's following orders kind of thing?
Initially, yeah.
Okay. That's fine. In that case, though, I might... tell us what it, like, if... So I do understand what the problem is. There's an alien intruder. Your character needs to be the one to solve the problem, but it just sounds like he's not really an active participant. Like, it sounds more like he's being kind of dragged along. Is there a way that you can tell us how he tries to solve the problem?
I can also just fix that by cutting the first officer, I think.
Oh, probably. Yeah.
But how is he trying to solve the problem?
Right.
It's too late into Act 2 at this point, I think, so I'm still... Yeah, I'm just going to leave it as is until I figure out exactly what happens at the end of Act 2.
Okay. Just take the officer out, and I think it works fine.
That's what I meant. Yeah, I'm going to take it out.
A newly resurrected employee must take his place and deal with an alien intruder. That sounds like a more active protagonist to me.
All right.
But looking good. No other objections or questions. Do you have any questions?
Thank you. Nope, that's good.
Thanks
I'll
for
make
sharing.
the changes.
Mm-hmm. On the cutting room floor. Hello.
Hello?
Hi, I hear you. Can you read out what you have for us there?
So it's on the cutting room floor, it's genre sci-fi thriller. The comps are Last Action Hero, The Prisoner, Terminator. And the series logline is, trapped by a mysterious employer in a limbo realm, a man is given a choice, stay in the limbo or travel through a TV to pull victims into the program and kill them before the credits roll to gain clues to escape so he can reunite with his family and finish his research into a life-saving invention. And the pilot logline is, After trapping a target in a noir TV show, Ray must find them and a way to kill them before time runs out.
All right. Let me just make sure I understand all this. Trapped by a mysterious employer in a limbo realm, a man is given a choice: stay in the limbo realm or travel through the TV to pull victims into the program and kill them before the credits roll to gain clues to escape so he can Okay, so there's way too much in the series logline. This is like too many ideas. And also, I think moreover, the series is not about him choosing to do this. He chooses to do that in the first episode, right? Like he gets his assignment or his job, right? So we don't have to say he's given a choice. Just start with trapped by a mysterious employer in a limbo realm. You just say a man, so help us understand who he is. Before that, right? Is he a scientist? It sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay. A blank, adjective scientist must, draw victims into the various shows and kill them in an effort to escape and reunite with his family. So cut back on all the information here and give us just a more condensed version of the basics. Make sense?
I think so.
Okay, let's look at the pilot. After trapping a target in a noir TV show, Ray must find them and a way to kill them before the time runs out. So I would be more specific here. So we know that every episode is going to be about him trying to kill somebody before the time runs out. So you almost don't have to tell us that part. I would tell us, what tactic does he use? Does he pretend to be a detective and pretend he's helping them with a case? Does he dress up as a superhero? Like, just help us understand what is his plan or what is his tactic in that first episode.
Okay. Well, in the first episode, the idea was he turns up with a briefcase of money, and basically tries to get a gun and some influence to try and find. So he's paying people off to try and get them to find the person for him, and he also wants to buy a gun.
What's so hard about that?
Fun?
What's so hard about buying a gun?
Well, he needs to find someone to buy the gun from.
Is this in the US?
Yes, but also he doesn't have any papers on him because he's just turned up, so I don't know.
It's not that hard.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. But maybe in the 1930s it was harder. I don't know, but I wouldn't think so. In fact, it would probably be way easier than it even is now, and it's exceedingly easy now. So I would maybe we do see this plot point of we need to get the gun in a lot of UK crime shows, but from an American perspective, it's really silly. Because we're just like, you guys don't have guns? What? Like, so...
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah. Well, the idea, though, was because he just basically spawned into this world.
Right.
He's not going to know anyone, so he is at least going to have to find the person that he buys the gun from.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, but that really just takes like $50.
Okay.
So it's just, I would not consider that to be worthy of including in the logline just because that sounds so easy. But I would think of more like, what tactic does he use to get close to them, to find them? I guess you're saying he hires people. He puts up is he like becoming like a vigilante basically? Like, think of how is he presenting or positioning himself in this world? Is he trying to convince everyone that his target is a serial killer or something like that? I mean, like, think more specifically, what does he really do beyond just getting the tool, right? So like, what's his interesting plan? You don't have to know the answer right now. Go ahead.
The more of the idea was the interesting thing was as I said, that the comp is a bit like the Terminator. He is sort of like the Terminator, so he just goes through the TV show. He's got sort of enough of an idea of where the person's probably going to end up, and he tries to kill them. The thing that makes it more interesting is that his target will act differently when they're dropped into this place. So in the first one, I decided that there'd be two shows that you see. The first one's the crime noir, and it's a soldier that gets dropped in, and he takes the place of the femme fatale who is trying to hire the detective, and then he uses the detective to try and find a way out and try and find this person. So while Ray's searching for the soldier's searching for him. So it's like this idea of that they're going to like meet in the middle kind of thing. And then at the end, there was like a short scene of a sitcom where the person gets pulled in with the target gets pulled in with a Mac 10, and he shoots the whole cast of the sitcom, and then the Ray throws in a grenade and blows him up, and then it rolls credits, kind of thing.
Okay. So it sounds almost like you might want to frame the pilot logline. If you're saying most of the unique tactics on an episode by episode basis are coming from the victims, then think of framing your premise logline or your pilot logline from the victim's point of view. So when a weapons dealer is pulled into a mysterious noir show, he must now escape this relentless killer by doing blank and blank, and maybe tell us what the victim does, and sort of hanging the story around that instead. That might work.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Sure, give it a shot. Let us know in the update next week or in the lab if you want to follow up on that. Thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
All right, let's keep going. I see a hand raised from Jen.
Hi.
Hi, Jen. What show have you brought for us today?
So this is my first time actually pitching this show in any format because I'm still really working on it. I typed it up in the chat. It's pronounced. It's the working title right now is Room Zoo. It is an animated family comedy. My comps are Centaur World, Turning Red, My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, and to a degree, Tuca and Birdie. My series logline is relegated to a classroom in the basement. A group of half-animal, half-human hybrids called were-critters fight for fair treatment in a biased middle school. And my pilot logline, it's very much a work in progress because my pilot is something that I've been struggling with for a while. When anxious 12-year-old Kenny discovers he's a were-dog, he gets relocated to a class full of hybrid students and rallies them to prove their strength through a race. But the stubborn were-possum Bex runs out on her own path. And this is something I've been struggling with for a while because I know my engine, but I'm still figuring out how I want to introduce all of this in like the story of the pilot.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to read back some of the basics to make sure I'm fully grasping it. Relegated to a classroom in the basement, a group of half-animal, half-human hybrids called were-critters fight for fair treatment in a biased middle school. Okay, so they're kids, and when they to figure out, they get old enough for whatever, they turn into like a wolfman or like a fishman type of creature like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a werewolf, but broader. It's a werewolf rules essentially, but broader, and it's speculative fiction. It's sort of like soft sci-fi rules where they have the ability to transform based on these animals, and it's I'm sorry, I'm getting anxiety right now. This is the first time I pitched it out loud.
That's fine. No, don't worry. Can I ask a question? So do all the were creatures follow werewolf rules with the midnight like full moon and stuff like that, or do they all follow different rules?
It's a lot. I'm still working on it, but it's a lot broader. The biggest influence I had is that it's very much informed as kind of like a disability metaphor. So it is something that's kind of persistently always present, but is not like it's something that you have to kind of learn to control, the kind of like animal instinct that is in everybody. And some of them have more animal instincts, some of them have more human like appearances and behaviors, while others have more like animalistic appearances and behaviors. So there are some characters who are like they don't speak as much, they speak in their animal voices. And that's why I kind of it has that protagonist. I mentioned that Kenny would be like the focal character, but I really envisioned it as I progressed as more of an ensemble show regarding those main 6 characters. And the pilot goal would be to introduce the dynamic of that room and put him in it so he can learn it with the audience.
Okay. So quick question then. What triggers them to transform into the animal form?
I was thinking it was anxiety. It was like anxiety. The way that Kenny discovers it is because he's put into a situation of high stress where he's kind of I originally I might change this that he's put on stage on the spot by his mother who works in the PTA to interact with one of the were critters who's going through her own crisis because she lost her comfort item, which is like a little catnip toy. And when he's put under pressure, he lets out this great howl, and it starts to become clear that he has these traits that haven't been noticed but have finally cracked because he's under a lot of pressure on this school year. So it's very much kind of, and that's why as I just worked with it, I realized this is similar to Turning Red, but it's broader and it's more comedy focused, with more of this kind of hybrid instead of the binary like 1 to 2 kind of transformation.
Mm-hmm. And so, are all the hybrids transforming when they experience anxiety like that, or just him?
So a lot of them, it's established that a lot of them have kind of have it under control. The more that they've lived with it, but there's one recurring arc where when we meet one of them, I believe what her name right now is Allie. When we meet one of them, she is a cat who is very much having her own crisis. And at first, she seems like she's very feral and aggressive, but then it becomes clear that she has lost something that is very important to her. And when she gets that back, she's actually very affectionate and sweet. And it's part of the arc for Kenny to realize that it's not just about, like, you're not always losing control. It's about just realizing who you are, the powers that you have, and realizing that part of the problem is that the people in school don't really appreciate, don't really understand the condition, and that triggers the engine, which is them trying to understand each other and what every other animal needs, and kind of form this little activist group of defending and helping other students who have these issues so they can eventually integrate into the school and be respected by their peers.
Okay, I got lost in the answer a little bit. So wait, is everyone triggered by anxiety, or just your main character?
I would say everybody, and my main character is the one who is the most prone to it because he is just coming into it.
Oh, okay, but so yes, it's everyone that's triggered. When you feel anxious, you turn into the hybrid monster. Is that right?
Yeah. I think when you feel anxious and you don't have control over it, it's sort of like, I'm trying to think of a good comparison. Turning Red is really what I keep going back to because it's kind of like in that movie where she loses control of the emotions, and then when she becomes more comfortable in it, she can control that transition, and that is that's what I was thinking of, because there's also a character who is meant to be Kenny Toyle, who stays in the animal form all the time, and she's not upset or anything. She's not anxious. She just chooses to stay in the animal form because she is very open and proud about her animal abilities, and she kind of messes with the human side. And so that is the main conflict of the pilot, is their conflicting sensibilities when they meet.
Okay. But so the reason that I keep asking about the trigger, and it seems like you're maybe not 100% sure yet, but that unifying idea is really core to the engine here, because that kind of right. So and if they're all triggered by anxiety, for instance, then that makes it a much clearer parallel to this being about neurodivergent, or people with anxiety problems or things like that being treated differently, as opposed to, well, they all have different rules that they abide by because one was bitten by a were fish and one was bitten by a were shark. And one transforms on the phone.
It is all it is all genetic, and that is one of the rules that I want to establish, is that because there's a subplot where there's a subplot that I envision where their teacher is like not really like, because they are not respected by the school, the teacher is a guy who most of his time in the class is spent trying to experiment and take DNA samples of them with the intention of eradicating the were critter gene, because he's jealous, because it's heavily implied he's jealous of their animal abilities. And so one of the ideas that I was having would be of he has a rifle, we rid the possum girl with Bex, because she is very open and proud, and she's like the kind of like the Bugs Bunny Wiley character, in the sense that she's unfazed by a lot of things. She's unfazed by him. She's willing to target authority, but by Bugs Bunny and like the Bart Simpson kind of angle, and something that we'll see over the course of the show is being able to see her in more vulnerable positions and see her own issues, and that's kind of a contrast to Kenny. She's the one that I feel a little more like confident in figuring out when it comes to that.
Okay.
I'm sorry if I'm embarrassing myself here.
No,
I
you're
really
doing
I
great.
wanted a chance to be able to vocalize this because I knew I had all these unanswered questions, and I really wanted a chance to work it out.
Yeah, this is what these are for. Like, these are for figuring out what's working, what's not working, where the question, like where the gaps are, and so you're doing fine. Don't worry.
Yeah.
So what I would say is, if that rule of when they become anxious, they turn into these creatures, or when they lose control of their, like I've seen Turning Red. I know how it works in that movie. It's when she loses control of her emotions. Very simple to explain, right? I would include that in the logline because that helps us understand what the characters are struggling with, the kind of things that, like the conflicts that will come up in the show, and like basically the that it also seems to me that instead of, like you're saying, they want to prove their strength through a race, like a like you're thinking like a track and field foot race.
Yeah, so the context of that, and that is the one thing I'm struggling with, is that what in this would be the third act, because this would be the interaction they have between the humans and the animal and the were critters that would prove them, that would be something that Kenny comes up with because he really wants to make a point to the people who suddenly turned on him after he became a were critter and was subjugated to this group. And I was trying to think of something that would work. Originally, I think it was like a basketball game. And then I kind of moved it to being more of a race.
Here's what I think of that, though. Their strength is not in question. Like, they're animals, and of course they'll be faster and stronger. So that's not really the best way to prove themselves, it seems to me, if this is based on, you guys are weird, you guys have anxiety, you're unpredictable, you're scary, like that kind of thing. I would think what you'd want would be more like a talent show or something like that. First of all, because a talent show is one of those notoriously anxiety-inducing, kind of like, all eyes are on you. Kind of like, more so than I understand a sports game has that sense of pressure too. Yeah. But like, getting up.
The context is that his father was a coach, so it was part of that, like, proving something to his father.
I see
but that's also something that I can kind of rework.
Right. I think something that would be more like, to me, a talent show just came to mind because that would be a great way to show what each animal can do as well. Like, show what your species has to offer. And also it has the dual role of, you have to overcome your anxiety in order to do this, or else you're going to, become out of control. I guess you'll turn into your most bestial animal form and start rampaging around the gym or whatever it is. So I would maybe think of framing that conflict not so much about, they're not trying to prove that they're strong. We know they're strong. In fact, that's probably why people are kind of afraid of them or treat them weird. It's because they're like, you're scary, you could hurt us. That's one of the conflicts.
I think maybe focus was what I was better thinking of.
Okay.
Because I think part of the issue, and I think I didn't make that clear enough in my logline, specifically the way that I designed Kenny was that he was not just a were-dog, but a were-poodle. Part of that issue was that when I designed his father, he was kind of pushed into being this very accomplished, his father, as I designed him, is the sports coach. He is very aggressive and very competitive, and he wants to push his son into that environment. It's like that. So it was a built-in kind of conflict.
But then,
and
but they would then all have to be.
That environment, and so part of it is that, he's not just like an animal. He's also like an animal that is seen as like not very not even very empowering or strong to most. So I think that's where there was kind of this emasculation aspect as well that I think got lost in my pitch. So I'm really trying to focus, and I think talking about the anxiety thing, I think that actually will help me. I think part of why I avoided that was maybe because I realized that this is kind of similar rules to Turning Red. I'm like, I don't want to ape too much from that movie, but the tone that I'm going for, I think, is different, and the angle that I'm going for.
That's fine. So yeah, that all sounds like it could work. I would just try to have that really clear rule and that consistent rule, because that sort of tells us what the theme of the show is to some extent. Like, it's about them overcoming.
Yeah, and I think you're right that if I work out that theme, then I'll be able to work out the conflict, because that's really what I've been outlining and going over my outline constantly, and then I hit that roadblock when I get to the third act, because I have trouble figuring out And I guess that really is the problem, is that I was having trouble figuring out the rules, and because of that, I was having trouble figuring out what their main motivation would be to simplify that.
Right. Okay, I think we've gotten to the root of it then. I found the rattly part in your car. It's the finale, which wasn't working, and because we don't know what we're working up to, then you don't know what they have to struggle with to get there. So what I would think is, if you're picking an athletic competition, first of all, it doesn't make as much sense, because if your main character has something to prove in terms of athletics, that doesn't mean everyone does. And so I would.
Right.
That's why you
Well,
don't
that's
have.
part
go
of
ahead.
that was part of the conflict, was that he wanted to prove something to the humans, and not all of them cared about that. And that's part of the resolution, is that he doesn't need to prove himself to be to prove that he's as good as them. What they need to do is make the school accommodate them, so to speak.
Sure, something like that. Yeah, I mean, I would think that I would try to give them a final test that shows that they addresses the concern that everyone has about them to some degree. It doesn't have to make everyone love them right away, but if everyone's afraid that, or if everyone thinks you guys are weird, you guys can't socialize, something like that, then you'd want to throw a party or a prom or something like that, or some kind of something that requires them to overcome that issue and show everybody, hey, we're not
More
like you think we are.
That makes sense. Like more social.
Yeah, if it's based on social problems, then I think a social challenge makes sense. A physical challenge wouldn't prove that much to the rest of the school, unless it required them to like we already know that they are physically capable, I guess, because they have monster traits, or monstrous, or animalistic, I should say. Parts to them. So we know they can jump really high. We know the frogman can win the basketball game and things like that. I would ask, what are we testing? So maybe you have to kind of tune that finale a little differently to find that way that they can prove that they're different, or that everyone should accept them as they are.
Yeah.
Great. Well, maybe you don't have to solve it now, but give it some thought, and I'm sure you'll come up with some good solutions.
Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for sharing this. Hope that helped.
It does.
Okay. We're at the end of our time, and this was week 1 of this boot camp. We have a 6-week boot camp coming up, so this one is going to be going. Let me go back to the schedule. So this one is going to run for the next 6 weeks. It's going to take us. Here we are. Story engine and logline. Breaking the pilot is next week. Week 3 is writing great scenes. Week 4 is crash course in one-sheets. Week 5 is cast of characters. Week 6 is finale and stinger. And then your pilot is done after that week of July the 19th. Oh, sorry, let me move this here. And then we are following that up with another free one-off class that's going to be on the 28th of July, pitching your TV show. That one's going to be really focused on communicating the overall vision of the show in a shorter period of time, selling us on what the basics are, what the story engine is. So you'll be applying a lot of what we talked about today. Hopefully this really cleared up your questions on things like story engine and how to make sure this pilot feels like it'll sustain beyond just that first episode into potentially years of other episodes. So we hope to see you guys soon for another class. If you are interested in writing a novel, come by tomorrow. Another free class, 12 to 2 on WordCamp, which is our connected server that's focused on novel writing. That's a free class from 12 to 2 tomorrow. And then we have in our Sunday 11 to 1 slot, those next couple classes are going to be free as well and open to the public. What makes a great script? We're going to be looking at kind of, I'm still maybe adjusting the concept a tiny bit, but it's going to be based on feature screenwriting topics. I'll update you more on that one soon. And then on the 30th, we have a logline workshop, which is just, simple, accessible to everybody. Bring your loglines, kind of like what we did today, but that will be focused on features only. You can see all the other classes we have coming up on this list here. Thank you so much for coming by, guys. Hope this was useful to you, and we hope to see you soon in the next one. So for you boot campers out there, I'll see you tomorrow for Novel Bootcamp and Lab from 4 to 6. And then you featured people, I'll see you on Sunday from 11 to 1. And then we've got plenty of other events happening this weekend as well. Nacho, do you want to? Oh, Nacho left already. That's okay. So we have Table Read 2 p.m. Sunday, and we also have Writer's Voice Saturday, 7 p.m. That's tomorrow night. Thanks, guys. We'll see you soon in your next class